What up, everybody from YouTube? Big shout out to hashtag Commit Boxing. Big shout out to Boxing United. Right now, I'm going to review the Deontay Wilder interview on The Breakfast Club. Now, for those of you who don't know what The Breakfast Club is, I find it hard to believe that anybody who watches my channel doesn't know what it is, but if by some chance you don't, it's basically a radio show, podcast, whatever you want to call it. I believe it's on the radio. I don't know for sure because I myself don't really watch The Breakfast Club. But you know, they talk about all kinds of things. It's mostly hip hop talk. They do talk about sports from time to time. I know that they've had Deontay Wilder. Of course, they've had Deontay Wilder. That's what this video is about. But I do know that in the past they also had Andre Ward. So I think one of the first interviews I watched Andre Ward do was actually The Breakfast Club. But I personally don't watch The Breakfast Club on a regular basis. And that's just because I'm not really into a lot of the topics that they talk about. And a lot of times, I find that they speak from a place of ignorance. So, in advance, I do apologize. I'm not really going to be naming any names of the people on The Breakfast Club, because I don't know their names. I know that there's a girl, a female, a woman. I know that there is some guy named Charlemagne. I don't know. There's a couple guys on there, if I'm not mistaken. I don't really know which one Charlemagne is. I just know one of them's name is Charlemagne, and it's a dude. That's everything that I know about The Breakfast Club. That being said, because this was an interview with Deontay Wilder, it definitely spiked my interest. So I made an exception and watched or listened, because a lot of times on YouTube I'm not actually watching the videos, I'm listening to them usually, and I'm doing other things as I'm listening. So I was chilling and listening to this Deontay Wilder interview. And there was a bunch of things that he said that I found interesting. Now, I know there's going to be some people who are probably going to listen to this and they're going to call me a hater because I'm going to criticize Deontay Wilder. But I also have some good things to say about Deontay Wilder in his interview. That's just what criticism is. So, for anybody who's going to label me a hater, I don't care. But anyways, let me go ahead and get into this. So, the first interesting thing that and I'm doing this completely off the top of my head. So, I didn't take no notes. I didn't put up a script, nothing like that. But the first thing that I found very interesting that Deontay Wilder said, well, first off, let me give you some context. One of the guys on The Breakfast Club asked him, what advice would he give Triple G on fighting Canelo? Should he still fight him despite the fact that he has, tested positive for PEDs or for clenbuterol or for banned substance, whatever terminology you want to use, he's tested positive. And the response that he gave was just, I'm sorry, it was very ingenuous and inconsistent, and it just wasn't true. First off, he didn't really answer the question. He didn't say, I think Triple G should go ahead and fight him. He also didn't say, no, I think he should, stand his ground and say that, the fight is off, that he's going to pursue becoming undisputed. If he would have said something along those lines that would have actually made sense, because Deontay Wilder, as we all know, he has refused to fight anybody who tested dirty. There are 3 or 4 fights that have been terminated. One of them came back to and actually happened with Luis Ortiz, but the initial fight was canceled because he tested positive for a banned substance. And he claims that he wants to become undisputed. So had he answered and said, Triple G should just stay away and not fight Canelo because he's dirty, and lead by example and pursue being undisputed because that's what all fighters should strive to do, then it will be consistent with his own actions. But like I said, he didn't answer the question, but he kind of implied his answer, because he said something, I'm just paraphrasing, he said something along the lines of, well, I'm a warrior and I'll fight anybody, I don't care if they're dirty, and blah, 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 when that's just not true. He wasted no time leaving Russia when Povetkin tested positive. He was in Russia. Wasted no time. Luis Ortiz, the fight ended up getting canceled, and then essentially ended up happening a fight later, because then Deontay Wilder fought, I believe, Washington when that happened. So, I mean, he straight up lied. But, I mean, he basically implied Triple G should still fight Canelo. That was the implication of his response, but he didn't actually answer the question itself. The other thing that I found very interesting is, he said that it's not about the money. It's not about, the fame. It's about the legacy. Now, I guess right now you could say that, you can buy that, because now he's saying, he'll take 10%. And I'll be honest, I don't think that's very smart. I think you should set some kind of a standard. And I do think that Deontay Wilder in that fight is worth more than 10%. I'm sorry. I know some people are going to disagree with me on this, but I strongly disagree with giving any professional fighter less than 35% of the purse. That's just how I feel, and I stand by that. And I even said it about Joshua when he was supposed to fight Pulev. I forget what the split was, but I think it was a 90-10 split, if I'm not mistaken. Or it might have been an 85-15. It was somewhere around there. And I said, hey, I'm a Joshua fan. I like Joshua a lot, but I don't agree with this. But that fight ended up not happening. I don't know how much Takam ended up getting paid, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was somewhere around there. And it's not that I think that Joshua is doing anything wrong per se. I mean, I do think it's wrong, but at the same time, if these guys are willing to let you get away with it, why not? I mean, if you're going to stand $100 to me, I'm going to take it. It's not above me to take the money. So I really can't fault Joshua too much. I mean, like I said, me personally, I think you should have a little bit more integrity. I straight up, I've gone, I'll just give you a quick example, because I do believe that, and this will be a quick story. When I was younger, I really wanted an Xbox 360. I had I've probably been working for just a couple years, and I was still playing the PlayStation 2, but I made up my mind I wanted to get a new system. I decided to go with the 360, went to GameStop, and there was a guy there trading in a 360 of his, that the tray, it opened, but you kind of had to do something to it to make it open. And it really wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't difficult. Actually, all you had to do is run your finger along the tray, and for some reason it would open. Not that big of a deal. But because of that, the GameStop wanted to give him $75. Now, I could have said, hey, I'll give you 76, or I'll give you 80, I'll give you 90, I'll give you 100. But the guy was obviously not satisfied with what they offered. And I said, hey, because I saw that it worked. I saw them test it, and it would play a game and everything. So I said, hey, I'll give you $150 for it. And he said, I think that's fair. The guy in the GameStop was like, hey, that's fine, but y'all got to take that outside. We went outside. He gave me the system. I gave him the money. And we were both happy. So I gave you that little example to say, hey, when I say that I feel that you should try to be fair, it's not just me talking out my ass. I practice that. I don't try to rip people off. Okay, I try to do something that I feel is fair, and I would like to think that these athletes would do the same. But as like I said, I also can't fault Anthony Joshua for taking what they're willing to give him. But anyways, like I said, I think that's a very big mistake of Deontay Wilder. Go for the 75-35 split. And I think that's fair. And same thing, Anthony Joshua, I think that should be the offer you should put on the table. Just because the guy says that he's willing to take 10%, I don't think that means you should necessarily cheat him, take advantage of him. Anyways, I went on a long ass tangent. Anyways, Deontay Wilder, I think, there was nothing wrong with his response on that, except for he should address the fact that he was trying to get 50-50 in the beginning. He should have addressed the problems that have happened in negotiations, before, and say, hey, at the time, that's the way that I felt. I've come to realize, that I needed to be a little bit more realistic. I came to realize Anthony Joshua has a lot more pull than me. I didn't really realize how true that was until after the fact. I think he should have addressed that. But he simply made it seem like it's always been that way, and that Anthony Joshua is just trying to do everything he can to make sure that the fight doesn't happen. And that's just simply not true. So, Deontay Wilder definitely has some inconsistencies in this interview. He got borderline preachy, which, I don't have a problem with that. Me, myself, I'm a Christian. But even if he was of another faith and he stood on those values, then, I could at least respect that, even if I don't believe in the same belief system that he does. But, what I found interesting is that he's there, like I said, he got borderline preachy, talking about, speak it, believe it, receive it, and all this stuff. That's exactly something you would hear an evangelistic, charismatic preacher say nowadays. And then turns around and says that he wants a body on his resume. I know there's probably going to be some people who disagree with me on this, but I think that was a terrible thing to say. I think that was a very immoral, very despicable thing to say. And let me explain. Nobody should want to take another person's life. I would like to think that if the purge were to actually happen, that all my neighbors would say, hey, I'm not going to murder anybody, but I'll smoke some weed, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I mean, technically, weed is becoming legal, but here it's still not legal for recreational purposes. But let's say the purge were to happen. Hypothetically, I would like to think that everybody on my block, everybody who lives around me, would say, just because I can murder doesn't mean I'm going to murder. You know, I think that would be honorable. You know, take advantage of some of the other things that you think should be legal, but they're not, but you're going to do it during the purge because you can. But murder definitely doesn't fall under that. You know, I think that it was a terrible thing for Deontay Wilder to say. Now, if he would have said, hey, when I get in the ring, that guy is trying to do the same thing to me that I'm trying to do to him. So I can't say that I'm going to hold back. At the end of the day, this is the hurt game. We all take risks when we step in that ring. I certainly hope that it never happens, but I can't promise you that I will never kill somebody in the ring. But if I do, it'll be purely because I was giving my best. And if given the chance, that man would do the same to me. Not that he would want to, but this is the name of the game that we play. See how the difference is there between I can't promise you it won't happen, and I certainly hope it doesn't, but this is what we signed up for, versus I want a body on my resume. Does nobody see anything wrong with that? I mean, I'm pretty sure there's people who've said it. I haven't watched a whole lot of videos, but I have heard some people say, you know, that they respect him for that. And I have to say, I'm sorry, but I disagree. I can't respect him for that because life, you only get one life. And to say that you want to take somebody just because you know you can and you'll get away with it because it's in the name of the sport is ridiculous. It's wrong. I'm sorry, that's just the way that I feel, and I feel very strongly about that. So I think I've crapped on Deontay Wilder enough, at least for now. Let me give a little break from that and talk about something that I do think that he said that was quite admirable, and that's when they asked him about, you know, Charlie Z. They didn't mention Charlie Z's name, but that's who they was talking about. And, you know, they asked him, you know, was he glad that he did it? Would he meet up with someone again and so on? And basically said no. He said that, you know, he's become a lot calmer now. And really the big, and that's not even what I'm giving him props for. What I'm giving him props for is this, when he started talking about his daughter. Now, one thing that I could say about Deontay Wilder is I may not agree with a lot of the decisions that he's made in his boxing career, but as a father, I think he's a great man. I mean, despite what you think about his actions in the ring, whether you think he, you know, has a lot of technical flaws, whether you think that he's fought nothing but bums, whether you think that he has he's had the easy road, you know, he is a good father. I mean, he does what he does for his daughter, and I don't think he's being ingenuine when he says that. I think he really does. I think that he wants his daughter to be proud of him. He wants to make sure that she's taken care of, and you can't fault the man for wanting to knock a guy out who was saying that he was going to take his daughter, tape her mouth shut, torture her, crazy things like that. You can't fault him for that. If you're a father, just imagine if somebody threatened to do that. Are you really going to care that if you're, you know, hypothetically, if you're a professional fighter, are you really going to care? No, you're not going to care if that person is just an average schmo regardless of the accolades that Charlie Z gives himself. I mean, he's a nutcase. Don't believe me? Check out Charlie Z's YouTube channel. The dude thinks he's undefeated. And then you go and you watch some of these quote unquote fights. You find that he usually gets a couple hits on the other guy and then he just puts his hands up and he's like, oh, I won. And even at that, even with his very low standards of what constitutes a win, there's a couple guys who whooped his ass. Deontay Wilder being one of them. But not even Deontay Wilder. There was another guy who was just another average schmo who whooped him. And he still claims that he's undefeated. So, I mean, the dude's obviously a nutcase. But anyways, whether he's a nutcase or not, you're threatening the guy's daughter. So, I have to give it to Deontay Wilder on that. Now, one of the reasons why I don't hate Deontay Wilder as a person, even though he said what he said about he wants a body on his resume, I don't think he actually believes that. I honestly think he did it more for publicity. One of those things that he says that he knows a bunch of people on YouTube are going to make videos specifically on that. And it's happened. I've already seen a couple videos where they're talking about that he said that he wants a body on his resume. But that's why I said he's a bit inconsistent in this interview because, you know, he said some other, he said other things that I think more align with who he is. I don't think he actually wants to kill somebody in the ring. But I do think that it's crazy that he said that. You can say controversial things without stepping over some boundaries. I think that was a boundary that he shouldn't have stepped over, but it's not the end of the world. At the end of the day, it's freedom of speech. He has the right to say it. I have the right to criticize it. That's why I don't hate Deontay Wilder for saying it. I just think it was a terrible thing to say. He could have said other things. I mean, just saying he's not willing to hold back and what happens, and that's just the name of the game, and that the other guy's trying to do the same thing to him, that would be controversial enough, I think, without stepping over that line. Because like I said, you only live once. Once you're gone, you're gone. There ain't no coming back. And, I just think he could have gone that route. The last thing I want to talk about, and I found this kind of interesting. They kind of talked about the Joshua Parker fight coming up tonight, actually. And here's the thing, and this is why I don't like to listen to the Breakfast Club. A lot of times, even if they're talking about a topic that I do, that I would like to hear about, a lot of times these people just don't know what the hell they're talking about. Boxing being one of them. I really watched it more just to hear what Deontay Wilder had to say and see, if he's being truthful, which a lot of times he wasn't. He was lying. And what have you. And just curious to see what they would ask him. And so they asked him about the Joshua Parker fight. And see, this is what this is what I'm talking about. I mean, I can't even really listen to them talk about boxing, because just listen to them talk about it, and you can obviously tell that they know nothing, very little about the sport. You can obviously tell that they don't watch it on a regular basis. I mean, the one dude on there, he said he was at the Deontay Wilder fight. When he fought Ortiz. But I mean, they've had boxers on their show in the past. It wouldn't surprise me if this was something this was an interview they were planning on doing. So he decided to go to the fight. You know, I don't know that for a fact, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. And he says something very interesting because he's like, oh, I'm picking Parker. Now, if you think Parker is going to beat Joshua, I don't think you're a complete and utter idiot. I think that you're wrong. But give your reasons. You know? And he gave absolutely no context as to why he thinks Parker is going to beat Joshua. You know, even some of the most idiotic channels that I've heard on YouTube would at least attempt to give you some reasons. Now, a lot of times those reasons won't be valid, but this guy didn't even attempt. He just said, I picked Parker. And then he also went on to ask, you know, do you think some fights are fixed? And what's funny is that I think Deontay Wilder felt a little uneasy about that question because of the accusations that Malik Scott threw his fight with Deontay Wilder. I mean, he got knocked out in under 90 seconds of the first round by Deontay Wilder, and a lot of people feel that he threw the fight. I don't necessarily think that he did. I just don't think Malik Scott is that great of a boxer, to be honest. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, he's not the worst, but I don't think he's just on that level. I don't necessarily think that he threw the fight. But that's not the only, you know, Deontay Wilder has had a couple fights that people think that were fixed. So I think Deontay Wilder kind of felt uneasy about that question. And his answer was, well, I think some have been fixed. So I think he was basically trying to say, hey, I think in the past there's been fights that have been fixed. But I don't think it's quite as common now. I think that's really what he was trying to say in his response. But, I mean, I just thought it was interesting to see Deontay Wilder's face when that question was asked. But, then the dude from Breakfast Club, that is, like I said, I don't know their names. I just know one's name is Charlemagne, and there's a woman there, and she was probably the one who knew the most about boxing out of everybody on the show, aside from Deontay Wilder, and that's simply because he's involved. But, and what's funny is, oh yeah, but anyways, before I go into that, then he was like, well, then I picked Joshua, basically saying he thinks Joshua's going to lose, but they're going to give it to him anyways. Which is ridiculous because Joshua hasn't won any fight that way. Had we been talking about Danny Garcia fighting somebody that we felt was pretty evenly matched, or maybe the other person would even have an edge on him but wouldn't be able to knock him out, that would make more sense because there's basis. But Anthony Joshua has knocked out everybody that he's come up against in every fight that he's been up against them in. That's just fact. Not to mention, a lot of it's been better, especially the more recent, has been better competition than anything that Wilder has faced. But, anyways, that's for another video. And I that actually is what I plan on doing in my next video. But anyways, you know, you could tell that this guy is just kissing Deontay Wilder's ass. And the girl on the show, she kind of did it a little bit too. And you could tell Deontay Wilder was feeling it, and he was like, oh, I could tell that you know about boxing. And really, she didn't know much more than the other people on the show, but she did know a little bit more. So she was sucking up to him, and he was facilitating, or reciprocating, I should say. But, I mean, overall, the interview was entertaining to listen to. I mean, it definitely kept my attention. There's a lot of times that I'm listening to videos and I will, quarter or halfway through stop because either it's way off the wall or it's just boring, or maybe it's not quote unquote boring, but I already know what's going to be said. Like I'm literally able to pick up what they're saying before they say it. And sometimes I like to listen to opposing views as well. And this one I could say, it was a pretty interesting interview. If you haven't listened to it, I strongly suggest that you do. I mean, that is unless you completely and utterly hate Deontay Wilder, then yeah, I would definitely not recommend it. But if you're somebody who likes boxing, especially if you're into the heavyweight division and you're intrigued by the current landscape, and the Joshua Wilder fight really has piqued your interest, I think this is a good listen. And it's like I said, some of the stuff I think Deontay Wilder actually did, had some pretty good responses and good respectable responses. It's like I said, but I definitely have some criticisms, especially on how he tried to paint the negotiations and the interactions with Anthony Joshua thus far, because a lot of it just simply was not true or embellished. But anyways, to all my subscribers, anybody watching my videos, or if you just so happen to stump on this video, hope you have a wonderful and blessed day. Peace.